Joining us is Congressman Rob Woodall, a member of the Transportation Infrastructure Committee and Budget Committees, here to talk about this $2 trillion infrastructure package struck between, a deal at least, between the president and Democrats. I just want to show our viewers what we're talking about. Repair roads, bridges, and transit, and possibly airports, upgrade water and wastewater infrastructure, expand broadband in underserved areas, and modernize and protect the power grid. So how do you go about this process? What do you do first when you have the president and Democrats at least agreeing to a number?
Well, you're exactly right, and it's even a lower bar than that, Greta. We had President and Democrats agreeing to a meeting. We haven't always had success just at saying yes to the meeting. The really more difficult conversation is going to happen next week when they sit down again and talk about how to pay for it. But we spend so much time talking about those issues that divide us. And no, roads and bridges back home, rural broadband, water infrastructure, these aren't issues that are Republican issues or Democratic issues. These are American, local, community issues. And if we can break through on these issues, I think it will pave the way, literally and figuratively, to a more productive Congress over the next 18 months.
Where will be the sticking points, though, between the two sides?
Well, how to pay for it is number one. And then, are we getting the best value for our dollar is number two. I come from a conservative state and a conservative district. But when we've had transportation challenges, we've given performance bonuses to contractors. Fiscal conservatives don't mind paying for performance. They mind flushing it down a rat hole and paying for non-performance. So part of this conversation will be, where do we get the money? The other part will be, how are we spending the money? Are we throwing it away on regulations that are worthless? Or are we investing it in ways that are environmentally responsible? One man's trash regulation is another man's treasure regulation, and that'll be a challenge.
Well, how will you prioritize what really needs, what are the infrastructure needs in certain states versus others? Are you just going to blanket, give money to a state? This is what you get. Everybody gets a piece of the pie?
Greta, you've identified what I would call the third highest challenge that we have, and that is we have states that have done nothing, waiting on the federal bailout to come. And we have those states that have been doing everything, raising the money locally, raising their taxes at a state level, and trying to keep up with a 21st century plan. Are we going to need to bail out some states that have not done enough? We are. There's some real safety concerns in those communities, and we're going to need to pay attention to that. But do we need to reward states that have done everything right and are trying to raise the revenue on their own? We do, and we need to make sure that in this largest federal infrastructure package ever, we don't discourage the responsibility that states have taken on and localities have taken on, and finding that level playing field is going to be very difficult to do.
On the question of how to pay for it, some point to the gas tax. I want to show viewers what it is right now. Federal highway user taxes, 18.4 cents per gallon on gasoline, 24.4 cents per gallon on highway diesel fuel. There's an annual tax on heavy vehicle use, load rating based tax on truck tires, and retail sales tax on trucks and trailers. This is how infrastructure is paid for now.
That's right. How the Highway Trust Fund is funded now. And that's, we've got two different bills that we have a shot at. One is the infrastructure bill that, as you included, water, broadband, a whole host of needs that America has. Second is a highway bill that expires next year, funded out of those gas taxes, those tire taxes. And we don't bring in enough money today to fund just the Highway Trust Fund part of that. People always talk about the gas tax. That was a wonderful way to fund infrastructure in the 20th century. But I drive an electric car today, Greta. I'm not paying my fair share in the gas tax. My mom's car is getting twice the gas mileage it got in 1993 when we set current gas tax levels, as are all Americans. So the gas tax is going to have to go away and get replaced. And we have some choices. A vehicle miles traveled tax. That doesn't mean someone's tracking you every day of the week. It might mean that you're just turning in a form once a year to say, this is how many miles I had last year. This is how many miles I have on my car this year. But it's a user fee that pays for highways. And I think it's very important that we keep it as a user fee. Taxes are things that someone else pays so that we can benefit. User fees are things that we pay so that we can benefit, and I'm in favor of that.
Well, I want to show our viewers, earlier this month we had on the program Casey Dinges, who is of the American Society of Civil Engineers. They grade our country's infrastructure every year. And this is what his views are on imposing a vehicle miles travel tax to pay for infrastructure. This is what he had to say.
Very interested in that. I think that's going to be the wave of the future. We still have a fairly low percentage of electric cars if you look at the entire national fleet in this country. So the gas tax is probably the way to go for the next 5 to 10 years. But as we think about the future and the way cars are powered, we're going to have to look for a way to charge people based on the actual miles they drive and be less concerned about how their cars are powered.
What do you think, Congressman? In the near term, raise the gas tax?
Well, he's exactly right that when you need to bring in $1 tomorrow, we have a gas tax that's ready to go. When our former chairman of the Transportation Committee, Chairman Schuster out of Pennsylvania, proposed the bill right before he retired last year, he said exactly that. We have to create a 21st century system. That's going to be vehicle miles traveled. But to pay for roads this month, next month, and the month after that, I'm willing to raise the gas tax, use the gas tax as a ready-to-go, soups to nuts funding proposal. That's what we'll watch for. Are people going to go back to old familiar because it's familiar and we're bereft of new ideas? Or are they going to do it because we do need a bridge to a new system and we're only going to use it temporarily? If it's a temporary fix, I'll be on board.
Okay, let's get to Bert, who's a Columbus, Georgia Republican. Our first call for the congressman. Go ahead.
How you doing?
Good morning, Bert.
All right. Listen, I can't even get these progressive city councilmen down here to come fix a pothole in my neighborhood. How you going to get these progressive Democrats to come out here and work with Donald Trump to fix the infrastructure of the United States of America? I mean, it's been put off for so long by all the people who's in elected government. And I think that if you got a person like Donald Trump and you got people like Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, they're directly at odds with each other. So I don't believe that they're going to get together because they don't want to see Donald Trump have a win, although he is winning.
Bert, I worry about exactly what you just said. Here we are with a presidential election right around the corner. Have we come to that place in America where if the other side is perceived to win, then I'm perceived to lose? I don't think that's the way it has to be. I think in America, we can all win. When that pothole in Columbus gets fixed, everybody in Columbus wins. When we treat water infrastructure seriously so that water quality is preserved, we all win. It has been true that we've had a reluctance of the sides to get together on some big issues. When we tried to talk about immigration earlier in the year, Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer said no to the president's invitation to come down to the White House. This time they said yes. Are there a lot of folks saying it's impossible? As you're alluding to, there absolutely are. But the way we've always gotten big things done in this country, Bert, is to bring the sides together. I can go through a long list of big American successes. They weren't done by Democrats alone. They weren't done by Republicans alone. We did them together as a country, and that opportunity exists in divided government today. The question is, will we say yes to it? And I hope that we will.
Let's go to Mark, Malone, New York, Democrat.
Yes, I'm calling to ask. I'm wondering why we cannot just put this on the credit card. We had no problem putting the tax bill on the credit card. Is it because it's a Democratic bill, or Democrats want to always pay for something? Why can't we just put it on the credit card? That's my question.
Mark, it goes to what Greta and I were talking about earlier. When we talk about taxes, we're never talking about raising taxes on ourselves. We're always talking about raising taxes on other people to pay for things. But user fees are things we pay for ourselves. Transportation, whether it has been a Republican president or a Democratic president, Republican Congress or Democratic Congress, has always been paid for by user fees. The users of the system, you and me, we pay based on how much we use it. That has slipped away in some Republican Congresses and some Democratic White Houses over the last 10 years. We're now borrowing from our children to the tune of about $100 billion. Now it's about $20 billion a year going forward to pay for highways because the Highway Trust Fund doesn't have enough money coming in from gas taxes. The chairman of the Transportation Committee today, Mr. DeFazio from Oregon, a Democrat, he wants to pay for this bill. I'm a conservative Republican from the Deep South. I want to pay for this bill. Let's leave all the other issues we disagree about behind us. Let's focus on something we can agree on, and that is let's not pass the bill on to our children, and let's do have a world-class infrastructure system for citizens of the United States of America.
Want to get your reaction, Congressman, to the president's immigration plan yesterday. Do you support the details that he laid out at the White House?
Well, I support an even larger bill than what he laid out at the White House. So you may not know, Greta, my district is 27% first-generation Americans. You want to find folks who love America, find those folks who are coming to build a better life for themselves. But I have folks who've been trying to do the system the right way. Folks here on H-1B visas that they've renewed for decade upon decade. There's no pathway for their children today because they happen to come from a country like India, and the wait list is 75 years long to get a green card. Yesterday's bill didn't do anything to address that. Today, I want to address that.
Why is it 75 years long? Explain that.
We have country caps today in an effort to bring a very diverse group of people to America. And again, we've always built this country based on immigration. We will build this country based on immigration. We've said let's bring in as many people as we can from as many different places as we can. Turns out there are a lot of Indians who are willing to come and build a new life in America, which is why our Indian American community is so vibrant. But if you're one of those high-skilled folks from India here on an H-1B visa, there's no room for you, so the law says today. Your children know no language but English, know no country but America, but there's no room for them today. And when they turn 18, they age out of the system. That's not who we are. That's not right. And so do we need to deal with illegal immigration? Of course we do. But we've got problems with legal immigration that we need to deal with. What I hope folks look at yesterday in the White House is the bill that the president talked about 2 years ago, very similar to this language, but he cut total immigration in half in that bill. The bill yesterday keeps immigration at the same levels that it's at today, and in his State of the Union speech, he said he wants to preside over the highest level of legal immigration in American history. Those are things I believe that can bridge a divide, but the details are always going to matter.
What didn't you like about what the president said yesterday?
Well, we do have a crisis at the border, and we didn't spend any time talking about that. Now, the president would say, I've spent so much time talking about that. This was about how do we reform the legal system. There are lots of families in my district that only got to America through family-based immigration. And so people are worried when we talk about family-based immigration going away or being curtailed. Now, what I would tell you is most of those families now have grown their own businesses, they're entrepreneurs in the district. They could have come on a skills-based visa. They just didn't. They came on a family-based visa. So transitioning from what people know to what people don't know is always a scary time. But I would encourage folks to look at what the president said in the State of the Union. I want to preside over record levels of legal immigration to the effect of growing America and growing the American economy. Unless you and I are willing to have about 10 kids apiece, the future requires a robust immigration policy. And I would say to folks who are questioning that, take a look at countries around the globe. Folks, some people are shrinking and their economies are suffering. Some folks are growing. If you love America, if you love American ideals, I think we ought to make a place for you here.
Another question for you. The Washington Post is reporting that you will get all the members of Congress on Tuesday a briefing from cabinet officials about the Iran threat. I understand that it'll be the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, the Pentagon Secretary, along with the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dunford. What will you ask them about what's going on in Iran?
Well, I wish that we could televise some of these things. We televise all the theatrics. C-SPAN is in every committee hearing room, and sometimes it's not good public policy, but theatrical extremism that gets portrayed. When we go to these classified briefings, it's the most serious group that you could imagine. And you see a unified Congress who cares about America, who cares about national security. Now, will I ask different questions than my Democratic colleagues will ask? Of course I will. But at the end of the day, we're one nation fighting one threat to freedom around the globe. So I don't expect there to be fireworks. Are there folks who have an axe to grind? Of course there are. But Iran is a real threat. Proxy wars are a real threat. We know that from the Cold War with the Soviet Union, and we know that today in the Middle East.
Are proxy wars a real possibility with Iran? The U.S. and Iran fighting a proxy war?
Well, I would say we already have that going on around the Middle East. If you look at who's funding terrorism in Israel, you can trace those dollars directly back to Iran. If you look at who's fomenting unrest in Syria, you can trace those dollars back to Iran. In Lebanon, trace those dollars back to Iran. So it's already going on today, Greta.
Would you support a direct war with Iran?
Well, I don't support war, period. I don't want our young men and women involved. I don't want any conflict to have to come to that. And I do think we have options left. You know, signing on to the Iran deal in the Obama administration was a disappointment to me. We had the world together, united in reining in that funding of terror that Iran was so well known for. We gave Iran an out to that, and now the rest of the world is happy to give them an out as well. We have to lead in reining in Iran's ambitions around the globe, because they're not ambitions to make the world safer. They're ambitions to make the world a more dangerous place.
We'll go back to calls. Anna in Philadelphia, Independent.
Yes, good morning. I have two questions. The first one is, last month the former Inspector General for Afghanistan complained that the Pentagon and parts of the State Department refused to be audited. And here we are with another undeclared war on the horizon, and nobody's seeing who's getting the profits from this. I think it's a great scandal, and we ought to have oversight. And if there's any kind of military action, it has to be voted on by Congress. The second thing is, I wonder how many people are concerned that since 1965, approximately 7% of immigration, legal, each year comes from Europe. Now, I think it's balanced out from whatever they were trying to balance out. Why don't we just go back to individual merit rather than from countries? And I appreciate his comments. Thank you.
All right, Anna.
Anna, I think you're talking to a thing that we can begin to agree on. Merit-based immigration was the point of the president's speech yesterday, not to keep anybody out, but to make sure that there's room for folks who want to come in. I think that can be a unifying issue if you view it through the lens of trying to provide more instead of provide less. We get there. As for audits on the Pentagon, we're working on the very first audit the Pentagon has ever known. You're absolutely right. There are a lot of dollars that disappear now when we go overseas. And the truth is, when I've got a man or woman in an American uniform sitting in harm's way, I care about the balance sheet second. I care about their safety first. Having the very best warfighter on the planet does come at a high cost. But the Pentagon is committed to getting that audit done. Again, it's going to be the first one in American history. And it's not going to be the last one. It's going to be the beginning of a process of accountability, yes. As the Article I Congress, I need to vote to declare war. I can't delegate that responsibility to the White House. And I need to track those dollars when they go out the door. I can't delegate that responsibility to the White House either.
Dan, Arlington, Virginia, Republican.
Hi. Going back to the gas tax, I fully support the gas tax or raising the gas tax. I have two concerns about the per mileage user fees that you're talking about. One is it provides, in some sense, a disincentive to drive places, and I'm very concerned about the economic benefits from that. Obviously, the gas tax does too, but it's somewhat disconnected. And the second issue is, how do you bridge the gap between people that drive in cities very short distances on very expensive roads versus people in rural communities that drive on relatively cheap roads long distances?
Dan, you make an important point. Back when the gas tax fully funded the Transportation Trust Fund, we would have exactly that debate about rural America and urban America. A state like Georgia, where most of the population lives in Atlanta, we would only get back about 70 cents of every dollar that we sent in gas taxes. Why? Because states like Montana and Wyoming were sending in less because they had fewer people, but they had more of a federal highway need so that we could get back and forth east to west across America. We have long had a redistributive federal gas tax system, and I expect that to continue going forward. So we would handle the rural-urban issue in that way. How we get from the gas tax to a vehicle miles travel tax or another revenue stream is something that I think all the options are on the table. But I will never pay my fair share as an electric vehicle driver, and I cannot maintain without a dramatic increase in the gas tax, because there are fewer drivers on the road and because folks are getting such better gas mileage today, cannot maintain the revenue levels needed without an increase in the gas tax that might be shocking to most American families.
Why did you buy an electric car?
I was in a hearing the other day. Greta and my colleague beside me said I bought a hybrid partially because gas prices were too high and partially because I wanted moral superiority in conversations about the environment. I love my electric car. I have a Chevy Volt and I have a Nissan Leaf. And I find my road rage goes down dramatically because I get such better gas mileage when I drive slowly in an electric car, much less aggressive. But I want to do my part. I don't support federal mandates in order to change America. I support individual action in order to change America. When we talk about loving the environment, loving the country, liberals and conservatives both love the country. We just view how we express that love through a different lens. So I believe personal responsibility begins, well, personally, and took that on. But I'll be happy to take you for a ride sometime if you want to feel the release that is slow driving in trafficked areas and no road rage at all.
And do you feel moral superiority?
I do. I absolutely do. And there's so many things like that. We have an option in Georgia, for example, to pay extra for green energy. Lots of folks say, Rob, let's mandate more green energy. But when I ask for a show of hands at a town hall meeting of who's agreed to pay more for green energy, there aren't many hands that go up in the room. I think we can tell what we value by what we're willing to pay for, and that's why I want to keep this user fee for transportation, Greta. It's one of the only places left in American government where we actually get what we are actually willing to pay for, and that helps the checks and balances in ways that we can't do any other way.
Catherine, Cleves, Ohio, Democrat.
Yes, hello. I'm a 70-year-old woman who's retired, and my question to you is, you can give the super-duper-duper rich in the United States a tax cut, but we have plenty of American families who take their children back and forth to school, back and forth to college, to their jobs. They themselves work, and you want to tax them. They didn't get any money back on the tax break because they're either working class or very low, bottom of the line, middle class, and you want to tax them. I say to you, Mr. Republican, you tax the people who have money. It's not the working class who have money. If you want to go back and rescind those tax cuts for those rich people so that they pay their fair share, I don't think that I should expect them to pay any more than I pay, but they should pay at least what I pay. And
okay,
I'm retired.
here's your point, Catherine. Here's your point.
Well, you're identifying exactly the problem we have whenever we talk about income taxes, right? The top 1% today pay more than the bottom 90% combined. Now, you say that's not their fair share. Others might say it's more than their fair share. We'll always debate those issues. But the truth is that most American families, about 85%, pay more in payroll taxes today than they do in income taxes today. Income taxes are about to be such a small part of federal income for most American families. We're not even going to have that conversation. I can't cut income taxes for lower and middle class families in ways that make a big difference. I can cut payroll taxes. Those are taxes. We're talking about user fees, and it could well be that you oppose user fee systems, that you don't think that we should pay based on how we consume. Tax shifting is one of those conversations we often have.
I think the point, though, part of her point that she was making is you have working class Americans who can't afford to live where their job is at, and they have to travel many, many miles, commute for long periods of time, and they're going to pay the brunt of this user fee.
Well, yes and no. If you're driving alone in your brand new Mercedes from the suburbs into downtown to work, you're going to pay that gas tax just as you do today. It'll be a larger user fee, and so you'll pay a larger amount. If you're climbing on the Metro bus to get downtown, you're sharing that cost with 60 other people on that bus. If you're climbing on the train to get downtown, you're sharing that cost with 300 other folks. If you're carpooling, you're sharing that cost with your community. It has always been true that user fees affect users equally. If folks want to abolish the user fee system, we can absolutely do that and begin to perpetuate the myth that someone else can pay for everything that we want. I don't think that's the right direction to go, and I don't think you're going to find Republicans or Democrats advocating for that.
Larry Milford of Michigan, Republican.
Representative, I think it only makes sense to use user fee for the roads and bridges. But I wonder if you would address the siphoning off of funds for things like Amtrak, public transportation, those kinds of things. Are you for that, or are you for getting those things out of the road funding?
I would like to get them out of the road funding, Larry. For folks who don't know, about 15% of the Highway Trust Fund isn't spent on highways. It's spent on mass transit projects. And that has long been a debate. Ronald Reagan actually signed that bill into law. I'd like to see us reverse that. Let's use highway dollars for highways, but let's come up with a funding stream for mass transit. Mass transit is here to stay in urban areas, and it's important in order to bring people back and forth to work. Amtrak's a great example. If you live in the eastern corridor here between Washington, D.C. and New York, you love Amtrak, and Amtrak is an important part of your transportation decision-making. If you live in Atlanta, where I do, and you want to go to Savannah, which is about a 4-hour drive away, it's a 3-day ride on Amtrak. I have to leave on a Tuesday to get there on a Thursday. So it's of no value to me whatsoever. That's what's important about having skin in the game in these transportation decisions. People in New York and Pennsylvania and Maryland are happy to pay for Amtrak fees because they get so much value. In Atlanta, I'm happy to pay for interstate fees because I get so much value. Keeping the user fee is going to make that conversation easier because you and I will be paying for those services that are most important to us.
Robert, Nashville, Tennessee, Democrat.
Yes, politicians are doing the American public a great disservice when they talk about the proxy wars of Iran and in particular in Israel. The politicians never give the context that Israel has been ethnically cleansing and has an apartheid regime relative to the indigenous non-Jews in Israel. And so when you say that it's all the indigenous people who are committing terrorism, you are not giving the true context, and it's time that the news and the politician give the context of ethnic cleansing in Israel.
Robert, I just couldn't disagree with you more. And in fact, I would tell you that one of the only bipartisan issues left on Capitol Hill is that of support for Israel. You cannot have law and order in a lawless state. And I can introduce you to Arab mayor after Arab mayor after Arab mayor who says, I'm not in favor of a two-state solution. I want a one-state solution, and Israel is that one state. But the law and order that Israel provides allows me to be an Arab, to be free, to have the freedom of speech, and to have the freedom of worship. I reject that notion of ethnic cleansing, and the facts don't bear it out.
Congressman, before we let you go about this threat of Iran, do you think that this administration wouldn't be able to confront Iran with a military action under the current authorization for military force?
Do I think that I could find a lawyer who could make that case? Of course I could. But I'm in the camp, Greta, that says it's really shameful that we're still talking about AUMFs from the first part of the last decade. It's understandable with folks like Robert on one side and others on another why Congress doesn't want to take these issues on head on. The president has the authority constitutionally to take action, temporary action, all over the globe. But if we're talking about a war, if we're talking about a long-term involvement, Congress has to. We haven't declared a war since World War II, Greta. We're not comfortable doing that in this country, in this Congress. I think that's wrong. I think if we want to involve our young men and women around the globe in the defense of freedom, then right across the street here in the United States Capitol, we should make a declaration of war and we should stand behind them 100%.
Rob Woodall, Republican of Georgia. Always appreciate the conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.